Have you ever turned down an invitation and felt relief instead of guilt? While everyone else is posting their Saturday night out, you're on your couch with a book, some tea, and zero regrets. Most people would call that antisocial, boring, maybe even sad. But psychology tells a different story. People who love staying at home aren't missing out. They're protecting something far more valuable than a night they'd have to recover from. If you've ever felt more alive in your own space than in a crowded room, you're about to understand why. Today, we're breaking down the psychology of people who love staying at home, the one society misunderstands, but science finally explains. Because staying in isn't giving up, it's choosing yourself. Psychologists call this optimal arousal theory. Some people need more stimulation to feel good, others need less. It's not laziness, it's not fear, it's just how their nervous system is wired. Your brain has a sweet spot for stimulation. Too much, and you feel overwhelmed. Too little, and you feel bored. For some people, that sweet spot is a concert, a crowded restaurant, a weekend trip with 10 friends. For others, it's a quiet room, a book, and absolutely no plans. Neither is wrong. They're just different operating systems. But there's more going on than just introversion. Some people love staying home because their environment gives them a sense of control they don't get anywhere else. Out there, the world is unpredictable. Loud strangers, last minute changes, small talk with people who don't care about your answer. Someone's music is too loud, the restaurant is too bright, a stranger stands too close in line. You didn't choose any of it. But at home, you control the lighting, you control the noise, you control the vibe. You decide when to eat, what to wear, whether to talk or sit in silence. For people with anxiety or high sensitivity, that control isn't a luxury, it's survival. You wake up knowing exactly what the day will hold. No surprise social obligations. No navigating someone else's energy. No reading the room to figure out what version of yourself you're supposed to perform today. No pretending to be more enthusiastic than you feel. No forcing a smile because someone's watching. Home becomes the one place where you don't have to perform. You can exist without an audience. You can move through your space at your own pace, eat when you're hungry, rest when you're tired, think without interruption, stare at the wall if that's what you need. That's not avoidance, that's sovereignty. And for people whose nervous systems run hot, constantly processing sounds, faces, emotional undercurrents that others miss entirely, that sovereignty isn't optional. It's the difference between functioning and unraveling. The world outside demands constant adaptation. You adjust your tone for different people. You manage your facial expressions. You calculate how long to hold eye contact, when to laugh, when to nod, when to ask a follow up question you don't actually care about. You monitor your volume. You track whether you're talking too much or not enough. You notice when someone's energy shifts and recalibrate your own to match. It's exhausting in a way that's hard to explain to someone who doesn't experience it. It's like running software in the background that never stops. But at home, all of that drops. The software goes offline. You don't have to manage anyone's perception of you. You don't owe anyone energy you don't have. You don't have to be on. You can just be. And that permission to simply exist without justification is something people who love staying home have learned to protect fiercely. They've figured out that saying yes to every invitation means saying no to themselves. That showing up for others when their own battery is drained doesn't make them generous, it makes them resentful. So they stay home, not because they're antisocial, but because they've learned that their peace matters more than other people's opinions about how they should spend their time. They've built boundaries that look like antisocial behavior from the outside, but feel like self preservation from the inside. They've stopped apologizing for needing what they need. They've rejected the idea that a full social calendar equals a full life. Because for them, fullness looks different. It's quieter, more intentional, less about quantity, more about quality, and completely theirs. Here's something wild. Studies show that people who enjoy solitude tend to be more creative, more introspective, and better at problem solving. Staying home isn't doing nothing, it's where the best ideas are born. Not in a crowded bar, but in a quiet corner, with a book or a thought spiral at 2 in the morning. When your mind isn't competing with a dozen voices, music, and visual chaos, it has room to wander, room to connect ideas that wouldn't have surfaced in the middle of small talk about someone's weekend plans, room to follow a train of thought all the way to the end without someone interrupting to tell their own story. The people who create art, write novels, solve complex problems, build things that matter, many of them do it alone, in spaces where they control the input, where silence isn't awkward, it's fuel. Einstein walked alone. Thoreau built a cabin in the woods. Virginia Woolf famously wrote about needing a room of one's own. Solitude isn't the absence of connection, it's the presence of space. Space to think clearly, space to feel deeply, space to hear your own voice instead of constantly absorbing everyone else's. And let's be honest, society romanticizes being out there. The influencers, the party pics, the live your best life culture, the endless pressure to be seen, to be social, to prove you're living correctly by documenting every moment. But what if your best life is a documentary, some soup, and zero obligations? That's not sad, that's self awareness. It's knowing that your energy is finite and choosing not to spend it on things that don't fill you back up. It's refusing to perform happiness in spaces that drain you just to prove to strangers on the internet that you're doing life right. The truth is, most people are out there because they're supposed to be, not because they want to be. They've internalized the belief that staying home means missing out. That solitude equals loneliness. That if you're not constantly busy and social, something must be wrong with you. But people who love staying home have rejected that equation. They've tested it and found it false. They know the difference between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is wanting connection and not having it. It's sitting in a room wishing someone would call. It's scrolling through pictures of other people's lives and feeling left out. Solitude is choosing your own company and finding it enough. It's turning off your phone on purpose. It's looking forward to an evening alone the way other people look forward to plans. One is deprivation, the other is preference. And once you understand that distinction, the guilt dissolves. You stop apologizing for turning down invitations. You stop feeling like you owe people an explanation for why you'd rather stay in. You stop pretending you're sick or busy when the real reason is just that you don't want to go. You find joy in small rituals. The morning coffee routine where you sit in the same spot and watch the steam rise. The favorite corner of the couch that shaped itself to your body. The way the light hits the room at sunset and everything goes golden for 10 minutes. The sound of rain on the window when you have nowhere to be. Things most people rush past without noticing. These aren't consolation prizes for a life unlived. They're not what you settle for when you can't have the real thing. They're the life itself. Quiet, intentional, yours. People who stay home aren't waiting for their real life to start. They're not hiding until they feel brave enough to join the world. They're living it, just differently. They've realized that meaning doesn't require an audience, that depth doesn't need to be performed, that the richest experiences often happen in spaces no one else will ever see. Now, some people stay home for a darker reason: social anxiety, past trauma, depression that quietly whispers, "What's the point?" And for them, home becomes both a refuge and a cage. So it's important to know, do you stay home because it fills you up, or because leaving feels too heavy? Because one is peace, the other is hiding. If the idea of going out makes your chest tighten, if you cancel plans because the thought of being perceived feels unbearable, if staying home is less about preference and more about fear, that's worth examining, not with judgment, but with honesty. There's a difference between choosing solitude and using it to avoid the discomfort of being seen. One nourishes you, the other slowly isolates you, and the line between them can blur if you're not paying attention. If you're staying home because the world feels too loud, too fast, too much, that's one thing. If you're staying home because you're convinced that if people really saw you, they'd reject you, that's another. One is about protecting your energy, the other is about protecting yourself from a threat that might not be real. And sometimes the only way to know the difference is to ask yourself, when was the last time I chose to stay home and felt good about it? Not relieved that I avoided something scary, but genuinely content with my own company. If the answer is recent, you're probably fine. If the answer is never, or you can't remember, it might be time to examine what you're actually protecting yourself from. But for those who truly love staying home, they're not missing out. They're just living differently. They find joy in things that don't require an audience, things that don't photograph well, things that would sound boring if you tried to explain them to someone who doesn't get it. They've built a life that doesn't depend on external validation or constant stimulation, a life that runs on a different fuel. They know what fills them, and they protect it without apology. They've stopped measuring their happiness against other people's highlight reels. They've stopped feeling guilty for not wanting what everyone else seems to want. Hit subscribe if you think you're this type. Psychologists say this is called low stimulation preference. These people don't need the world to entertain them. Their inner world is rich enough. They read, they create, they think, they rest. They have hobbies that don't translate well to social media. Hobbies that take hours and produce nothing you can show off. They have routines that look boring from the outside, but feel sacred from the inside. Making the same breakfast every morning, walking the same route, sitting in the same chair at the same time. To someone else, that might look like monotony. To them, it's stability. It's a life they've designed on purpose. They've learned that depth doesn't announce itself. It doesn't perform. It doesn't need applause. It exists quietly, in spaces most people never slow down enough to notice, in the pause between thoughts, in the comfort of a familiar room, in the freedom of not having to explain yourself to anyone. So if you're someone who turns down invitations without guilt, who feels genuinely happy on a solo Saturday, who'd rather rewatch your comfort show than make memories with people you barely know, you're not broken. You're just wired for depth over noise, for peace over performance, for meaning over momentum. You figured out that your time and energy are yours to allocate, that no one else gets to decide what a full life looks like for you, and you've chosen to spend them on a life that actually feels good to live. Not one that just looks good from the outside, not one that checks all the boxes society says you're supposed to check, but one that fits. You're not hiding from the world, you're building one that fits. One where you don't have to shrink yourself, where you don't have to pretend that loud equals fun or busy equals meaningful, where you can be exactly who you are without explanation or apology. Tell me, do you prefer staying home, or do you think we're all just making excuses? And if you want the psychology that most people never hear about themselves, the next video is going to hit you harder than this one. Click it. You'll understand why.